My sister told one lie about me, and my entire life collapsed overnight. There was no investigation, no evidence, no chance to explain. My family believed her without hesitation, asked me to leave quietly, and chose silence over truth. I lost my relationship, my reputation, and everything I'd built, not because I was guilty, but because admitting the truth would have embarrassed them. Stay to the end, because what happened after the accusation is darker than the lie itself. But before we continue, please like and subscribe to help us reach a wider audience. Thank you. The night it happened didn't start dramatically. There was no shouting. One moment, everything was normal. The next, I was being told to leave, immediately. My sister Maya stood in the living room, face pale but steady. My parents stood behind her, silent in a way that felt rehearsed. Prepared. My mother spoke first. "You need to pack a bag and go somewhere else for a while." I laughed at first, because it didn't make sense. "For what?" I asked. My father avoided my eyes. "Maya says you crossed a line." That phrase, crossed a line. Vague enough to mean anything. Heavy enough to mean everything. I looked at Maya. She didn't look angry. She looked resolved. "Tell him," my mother said softly. Maya took a breath. She said I made her uncomfortable, that I'd acted inappropriately, that she didn't feel safe around me anymore. She didn't describe what I'd supposedly done. She didn't need to. The accusation itself did the work. I felt the room tilt. I searched my parents' faces for doubt, for something. I found none. I asked what she meant. My mother interrupted. "This isn't a debate." That was the moment I understood. Something was deeply wrong. I hadn't been asked what happened. I hadn't been questioned. The verdict had already been reached. "I didn't do anything," I said. "You know that." My father finally looked at me. "We don't want this to become something bigger," he said carefully. "So the best thing is for you to leave quietly." Quietly. As if noise was the real danger. I asked where Maya got the idea when this supposedly happened. Maya shook her head. "I don't want to talk about it," she said. "I just want space." I packed a bag under their supervision. As I walked out the door, my father said something I'll never forget. "We're doing this to protect everyone." Everyone except me. That night, I slept on a friend's couch. By morning, the damage had already spread. Texts stopped coming in. A group chat went silent. A cousin blocked me. No one asked me what happened. Maya had spoken, and Maya was always believed. I called my mother the next day. No answer. I called my father. Straight to voicemail. The first person who did respond was my aunt. Her message was short. "Give your sister space. This is serious." I asked what I was accused of. She said she didn't know, and didn't want to. That's when the panic set in. This wasn't about truth. It was about narrative. And the narrative didn't include me. 2 days later, my partner left. She didn't yell. She just said she didn't know what to believe, and that was enough. I told her there was no evidence. She just nodded. "I need to protect myself," she said. I understood her fear. I just didn't expect to be collateral. By the end of the week, I had lost my home, my relationship, and my family. I finally got a message from my mother. "Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." As if defending myself was an inconvenience. I asked one question. What exactly did Maya say I did? Her response came hours later. She says you made her uncomfortable when she was drinking. That's all she wants to say. No date, no location, just discomfort. I realized then how powerful ambiguity can be. If the accusation is vague enough, it can't be disproven. I asked to speak to Maya. My parents refused. "She's not ready," they said. I asked for a conversation, mediation, anything. They said no. "She doesn't owe you that." That sentence broke something in me. I didn't matter anymore. Not my truth, not my history. I was now a risk, and risks are easier to remove than examine. Days turned into weeks. My name became unspoken. No one corrected anything. No one defended me, because questioning Maya would mean admitting they might have destroyed the wrong person. One night, I realized something terrifying. If Maya decided to escalate the story, my life could be over. Not socially damaged. Over, and everyone around me would call it unfortunate, but necessary. That's when fear replaced shock. Fear of what she might say next. I sent one last message to my parents. If you let this stand without the truth, you are choosing a lie over your son. My father replied the next morning, "We're choosing peace." That was the moment I stopped trying to go back, because peace built on a lie doesn't heal anything. It just buries someone alive. And I was the one being buried. The first thing you learn when a lie becomes official is that it doesn't need proof anymore. It only needs repetition. I stayed quiet for a while after my father's message, not because I agreed, but because I understood the rules of the game I'd been forced into. Anything I said could be reframed as denial. Any emotion could be read as guilt. Any attempt to defend myself could be labeled aggression. So, I did the opposite. I went silent. At first, I thought that might help. I thought distance would cool things down. That was naive. Silence didn't create doubt. It created space for the story to grow. I heard pieces of it secondhand. A friend mentioned my name in a conversation I wasn't part of. A former coworker sent a message, then unsent it. Someone I hadn't spoken to in years blocked me overnight. The story was evolving without me, and because it was vague, people filled in the blanks with whatever scared them most. I tried to anchor myself in facts. I replayed every interaction I'd ever had with Maya. Every holiday. Every conversation. There was nothing, no incident, no behavior. That didn't matter. The story wasn't about what happened. It was about what could be imagined. 2 weeks after I was asked to leave, my parents called me in. Not an apology, a warning. They sat across from me like mediators who had already chosen a side. My mother spoke first. "Maya is having a hard time," she said. "She's anxious. She's not sleeping." I nodded. "I imagine she is," I replied. She accused her brother of something life-destroying. My father cleared his throat. "This isn't about assigning blame," he said. "It's about minimizing damage." There it was again. Damage. Never injustice. Never truth. Just optics. They told me I needed to be careful about what I said, that talking too much could escalate things. I asked them directly, "Are you asking me to deny it quietly or accept it quietly?" Neither of them answered. Instead, my mother said something worse. "Sometimes," she said, "things don't need to be resolved publicly to be resolved." I stared at her. Resolved for who? She didn't respond. I was expected to stay away. Expected to keep quiet. Expected to let time do the work. Time, apparently, was supposed to erase me. A month later, I found out Maya had told a different version of the story to different people. To some, I had made her uncomfortable once. To others, it had been ongoing. She never had to lie outright. She just let people assume. And assumptions are powerful. I learned later that my parents knew about this. They didn't correct it. They let ambiguity do the work. This wasn't panic. It was strategy. The professional fallout came next. I felt the shift. Meetings I was no longer invited to. Projects reassigned without explanation. Then HR called. Not an accusation. Just a concern. They asked if there was anything I wanted to disclose. I asked them what they'd heard. They said they couldn't say. I resigned 2 weeks later before anything could become formal. Leaving felt like survival, but it also felt like defeat. By then, my relationship was officially over. Mutual friends had chosen sides without ever asking me a question. I existed in a kind of limbo, not convicted, not cleared, just removed. The worst part was the gaslighting. My parents would occasionally check in, as if I were something fragile. They never asked if I was innocent. That silence spoke louder than any accusation. One night, I broke. I called my father and asked the question I'd been avoiding. "Do you believe I did this?" There was a long pause. "I believe Maya feels the way she feels," he said. I pressed harder. "That's not what I asked." Another pause. "We don't want to undermine her experience." That was the moment I understood. I would never be believed. Not because of evidence, but because belief itself had become political. Believing her required nothing. So they chose the easier path. Weeks later, I learned the truth by accident. A cousin told me quietly that Maya had admitted something during a fight. She hadn't meant for it to go this far. She said she had exaggerated, that she was angry that night, that she didn't think people would take it like this. But once the story was out, she couldn't pull it back. And once my parents had defended her publicly, they couldn't reverse course without admitting they had destroyed the wrong person. So, they doubled down. I confronted my parents. They didn't deny it. My mother cried. She was in a bad place, she said. She didn't realize the consequences. I laughed. A short, broken sound. And you? I asked. What about your consequences? They asked me not to pursue it further, not to demand retractions. They said it would tear the family apart. I told them I wouldn't lie to protect their version of peace. My father looked at me and said, "If you push this, you'll lose whatever connection you have left." I asked him what connection that was. He didn't answer. That was the last real conversation we had. I stopped waiting for fairness. I moved, changed routines, built a new circle from scratch. The fear didn't vanish, but it softened. And then, one day, something unexpected happened. Maya went public. She framed herself as a survivor who had cut off a toxic sibling. Everyone knew it was me. The comments flooded in. Support, praise, validation. My parents shared it. That was the moment the door closed completely. They hadn't just stayed silent, they had endorsed the lie. They weren't waiting for the truth. They were committed to the story. And if I wanted my life back, I was going to have to build it without them. The weight of certainty. When Maya went public, something inside me went quiet. Not angry quiet. Not shocked quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when your mind finally accepts that there is no misunderstanding left to correct. Her post wasn't explicit. She wrote about finding the courage to cut off someone toxic, about choosing safety. The comments did the rest. People filled in the blanks, congratulated her bravery, told her they were proud. My parents shared the post, without a caption. That was their statement. I stared at my phone for a long time that night. I kept waiting for something to rise in me. Rage, grief, desperation. Nothing came. What I felt instead was finality. They had chosen. From that point on, I stopped hoping for vindication. Hope had been the most exhausting part of this whole thing. The quiet belief that someone, eventually, would say, "This doesn't add up." But hope depends on curiosity, and no one was curious anymore. Once a story gives people moral certainty, they stop asking questions. I stopped checking social media. I focused on building a life small enough to protect. New routines, new habits. I learned how to exist without witnesses. There were nights when the weight of it all caught up to me, when I replayed conversations I never got to have. But fighting requires an audience willing to listen, and I'd never had one. Months passed. Then, something unexpected happened. A mutual acquaintance reached out. They asked a single question. What actually happened? It was the first time anyone had asked me that, without fear in their voice. I told them everything. Calmly, factually. They listened. When I finished, they said something simple. "That's not what I was told." I nodded. That's usually how it works. They didn't promise to fix anything. But something shifted, because even one person choosing to question the story reminded me of something important. Truth doesn't disappear just because it's buried. It waits. Over the next year, small cracks appeared. Privately, people started reaching out in indirect ways. Neutral check-ins. They didn't say, "We were wrong." They said, "I never really understood what happened. It wasn't justice, but it was movement." Meanwhile, Maya's story started to strain under its own weight. When someone builds an identity around harm, they're expected to remain fragile forever. I heard about it secondhand. How she became defensive when people asked questions. How she avoided specifics. My parents worked harder than ever to manage perception. They were exhausted, and for the first time, I wasn't. Because I wasn't carrying the lie, they were. One evening, my father showed up unannounced. He looked older, smaller. He said my name the way he used to, cautious, hopeful. "I didn't come to argue," he said. "I came to ask you something." I waited. "Can you forgive us? Not Maya. Us." I asked him what exactly he was asking forgiveness for. He struggled. "For how things unfolded," he said finally. I shook my head. "That's not accountability," I replied. "That's phrasing." He looked hurt. "We were scared," he said. "We didn't know what to do." I told him something I'd practiced many times alone. You chose what was easiest to live with, not what was true. He didn't deny it. He asked if I would consider coming back into the family. Slowly, quietly. I asked him a question I already knew the answer to. "Has Maya told the truth?" He looked down. "No," he admitted, "but forcing her would destroy her." I let that sink in. And destroying me didn't matter? He didn't answer. That conversation clarified everything. They didn't want truth. They wanted relief. They wanted me to absorb the damage so they wouldn't have to face it. And I was done absorbing anything. After that, I cut contact completely. Not out of anger, out of preservation. I stopped explaining myself to people who benefited from misunderstanding me. I stopped waiting for apologies that would never come. The loneliness didn't disappear overnight, but it changed shape. It became quieter, cleaner. I learned how to trust myself again. I learned that innocence doesn't protect you. Boundaries do. Years later, when I look back at that night, I don't see the beginning of my destruction. I see the moment I stopped belonging to a system that required my silence to function. And that, as painful as it was, saved me. Because the truth is this: if your family can erase you to protect their peace, they were never protecting you to begin with. And sometimes, the most courageous thing you can do is refuse to carry a lie that was never yours. Years passed before the truth stopped feeling urgent. Not because it mattered less, but because my life no longer revolved around it. There's a strange thing that happens when you survive something that was meant to erase you. At first, every day feels like a response. A quiet argument with people who aren't in the room. You measure your progress against the damage, hoping that one day it will outweigh it. Then, slowly, that impulse fades, not because you've won, but because you've stepped out of the arena entirely. The distance gave me perspective. I started to see the pattern for what it was, not just a single lie, but a system that rewarded silence and punished disruption. A family dynamic that had always relied on one person absorbing discomfort so others could feel stable. That person had been me. Once I stopped playing that role, everything else became clearer. The truth didn't explode. It unraveled quietly. Inconsistencies stacked up. People noticed things they'd ignored before. Maya's story didn't evolve. It just stalled. And when a story stops moving, people begin to look at it more closely. I wasn't there to witness it. I heard about it in fragments. How she became defensive, how she reacted sharply when anyone asked for clarity. When belief is built on emotion alone, it requires constant maintenance. Truth doesn't. My parents tried to hold everything together. They acted like gatekeepers of a fragile peace that only existed if no one asked the wrong questions. But peace that depends on ignorance doesn't last. Eventually, the cracks reached them. Friends began to ask why nothing had ever been clarified. Someone asked directly whether there had ever been an investigation. There hadn't. That question, simple, neutral, undeniable, did more damage than any confrontation ever could. I wasn't there when they finally had to face it. I only know that, at some point, the silence they'd relied on turned against them. They tried to reach out again. Not to apologize. To reconnect. To move forward. But by then, I had already done that, just not in the direction they wanted. The last message I received from my mother came late at night. She said she missed me. Said she wished things were different. I read it once. Then, I put the phone down, because understanding is not the same as accepting. And empathy does not require self-sacrifice. I didn't respond, not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. I had learned something crucial. Closure is not something other people give you. It's something you stop chasing. I didn't need them to admit what they did. I didn't need public vindication. What I needed, I already had. My life back. My sense of self intact. My boundaries unbroken. I no longer flinched when my phone rang. I no longer feared being misunderstood. I built relationships slowly, with people who didn't mistake silence for guilt or emotion for truth. I learned to trust my own voice. And perhaps most importantly, I learned this. Sometimes, the most dangerous lie isn't the one told about you. It's the one you're expected to live under quietly, so others don't have to face the consequences of their choices. I refuse to live under it. If there's anything I hope you take from this, it's awareness. If you've ever been pressured to disappear for someone else's comfort, if you've ever been asked to stay silent to keep the peace, you are not alone. And you are not wrong for choosing yourself. And if this story stayed with you, if you understood exactly why walking away was the only real option left, then I invite you to stay here. Subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and keep listening. Stories like this don't get told often, because they're uncomfortable. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is make sure they're heard. YouTube Metadata Kit. Title options. 1. My sister's one lie destroyed my life. Years later, the truth finally came out. 2. I was exiled from my family over a false accusation. Now they want me back. 3. The cost of silence. How my family chose a lie to protect their peace. Description hook. We're choosing peace. That's what my father told me the night I was kicked out of my own family based on a vague lie from my sister Maya. I lost my job, my partner, and my reputation overnight. This is the story of what happens when a family decides that your destruction is an acceptable price to pay for their comfort, and what happens when you finally stop playing their game.